Hey everyone, welcome to your final customary conversion lesson. First we talked about length, then we talked about weight. Today we're going to talk about something called capacity. When you're talking about capacity, we're saying how much can fit inside of an object. Most of the time it's talking about liquids. So with our units today, we have 5 different units that you have to worry about. So I'm going to introduce them to you. I'm going to go from our smallest unit to our biggest unit. Our first one might seem kind of confusing because it sounds like one with weight, but it is totally different. So listen very carefully. Your first unit is what we call the fluid ounce. Not just the ounce, the fluid ounce. When you hear fluid ounce, you know that you're talking about capacity. This bottle of hand sanitizer is the same size as 1 fluid ounce. It's a tiny little bottle, but that is 1 fluid ounce. That's your first unit. The next unit is probably one that's going to be familiar to you. You've probably heard it in the kitchen. That is 1 cup. This container is the same size as 1 cup. Your next unit is what we call a pint. After the pint, we have a quart. And after a quart, we've got a really big one. You've probably heard of this when it comes to drinking some milk. You have the gallon. Now, let me show you a little bit about how all of these units work together. Let's start with talking about converting our smallest units. The fluid ounce and the cup are our 2 smallest units. So, what I could do, is I could take 8 of these fluid ounces and dump it into this cup, and it would fill all the way up to the fill line. So that's correct. There are 8 fluid ounces in 1 cup. So I'm not going to dump my very precious hand sanitizer into this cup, but if I dumped 8 of these in, yep, very good, I would have 1 cup of hand sanitizer. Let's move on to our next unit. So when I go from the cup to the pint, what I can do is I can take 2 cups and they would fill up all the way to the pint line. So what that means is 1 pint equals 2 cups. Let me show you how that works. Our next unit is the quart. When I'm going from pints to quarts, I can take 2 pints and put them into my quart jar, and yep, I would end up with 1 quart. Let me show you how that one works. With every conversion up to this point, all you've had to do is say that there were 2 in each one. Well, when we add the gallon to it, it's a little bit different. When I'm going from quarts to gallons, I have to remember that there are 4 quarts in 1 gallon. The way you can remember that is that there are 4 quarters in $1. So just like that, there are 4 quarts in 1 gallon. Let me show you how that one works. I just showed you how all of our different unit measurements work together, but I don't know about you, that's kind of difficult to remember. So I have a little diagram that might help you remember how all of these measurements work together. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a great big G on my screen. That G stands for, yep, it stands for gallon. This G is showing you 1 gallon. Inside of 1 gallon, you have 4
quarts. So I'm going to draw 4 Q's to stand for our 4 quarts that are in 1 gallon. The next unit that we had was the pint. Do you remember how many pints are in each quart? Yep, there are 2 pints in each quart. So I'm going to draw 2 P's inside of each quart. Our next unit that we're going to do is the cup. Now I don't have room for it to draw the C's inside, but I'm going to draw a little dot. Inside of each pint, you're going to have 2 cups. So each pint is going to get 2 dots. And then if you remember, each cup stands for 8 fluid ounces. So what I can do with this diagram is I can look at it and figure out how much of something I'm going to have in each unit. For example, if I want to know how many pints are in 1 gallon, all I have to do is count. So I can see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pints in 1 gallon. Do you see how helpful this diagram is? I recommend as you're doing your work today that you use this diagram, maybe draw one your own or look one up online, and it will definitely help you as you're completing your work. That big G is definitely helpful, but let's talk a little bit about the math. And let's look specifically at our customary capacity measurements. First, let's look at the cup. We know that 1 cup equals 8 fluid ounces. Our next unit that we have is we have the pint. We know that 1 pint equals 2 cups, and if I have 2 cups, that means I also have 16 fluid ounces. Our next unit is the quart, and we know that 1 quart equals 2 pints, and if I have 2 pints, that means I have 4 cups, and 4 cups means 32 fluid ounces. And our biggest unit is the gallon, and if I have 1 gallon, we know that there are 4 quarts in 1 gallon, and 4 quarts is going to equal 8 pints. 8 pints equals 16 cups, and 16 cups equals 128 fluid ounces. These are all the numbers that you need to know as you're completing your work with customary capacity. Once you know your measurements, then all you have to do is say your little rhyme. Big to small, multiply them all. Small to big, divide. You dig? Once you figured out if your first measurement is big, and this next measurement is small, or the other way around, then you can figure out what your operation is. This is just like you've been doing for the last 2 days. Now you have all the information that you need, so let's hop into some examples. Our first example, we want to figure out how many cups are in 3 pints. So first you ask yourself what you know about these measurements. The first thing I know is that I have 3 pints. The second thing I know is that each pint has 2 cups in it. After I talk about what I know about my measurements, I have to decide my operation. And since I'm going big to small, what do I need to do? That's right, we multiply them all. So I take that information from above and I'm going to multiply 3 pints times 2 cups, and I end up with 6 cups. So that means 3 pints equals 6 cups. This is just like what you've been doing for the past 2 days, just a different unit. Let's try another one. In this question, we're trying to find out how many quarts are in 64 fluid ounces. So when I figure out what I know about these measurements, I know that I have 64 fluid ounces, and when I look at my diagram, I know that 1 quart equals 32 fluid ounces. And when I'm moving from ounces to quarts, I'm doing small to big, so what do I need to do? That's right, divide, you dig? So I'm going to divide that information. I'm going to do 64 fluid ounces divided by 32 fluid ounces, and I end up with 2 quarts. So what that means is 64 fluid ounces equals 2 quarts. You're doing awesome at this. Let's keep going to a question that's just a little trickier. I bet you can already see why this one's a little trickier. We have a decimal in this question, but don't worry, it is the exact same process. So let's figure out how many cups are in 3 5/10 gallons. First, what do we know about our measurements? We know that we have 3 5/10 gallons, and we also know that 1 gallon equals 16 cups. Now, when I go from big to small, what do I need to do? We multiply them all. So I'm going to take these numbers and multiply them together. When I multiply my 3 5/10 gallons by 16 cups per gallon, I end up with 56 cups. The only thing that makes it tricky is that you have to use what you know about decimal multiplication to solve. But I know you're going to do awesome if you come across any questions like this. Let's do one more example. In this example, we want to find out how many quarts are in 9 pints. When I figure out what I know about my measurements, I know that I have 9 pints and that 1 quart equals 2 pints. In this example, I'm going small to big, so I need to divide. You dig? Now, here's where it's a little tricky. When I divide 9 by 2, I'm going to come up with a remainder. 9 divided by 2 equals 4, remainder 1. Now, yesterday we talked about how to interpret that remainder, and let's do it again today. That 4 is my quotient, and my quotient tells me how many quarts I have. Because remember, we're trying to make groups that equal 1 quart. And when we made those groups, we ended up with 4 whole groups. That remainder is going to tell me how many leftover pints didn't fit into any groups. So, when I have 4 remainder 1, what that means is that 9 pints is the same as 4 quarts and 1 pint. You can use this when you're doing any kind of conversion. Just make sure that you have the correct units. Your checklist to success today is the same as it's been for length and for weight. Your first step is you ask, what do I know about my measurements? Make sure you use those conversion charts to help you. Then, do I need to multiply or divide? And that rhyme, big to small, multiply them all, small to big, divide, you dig? That will help you in step 2. And then step 3, you just solve and check your work. This is just like the past 2 days. Today's work might seem like a lot of things to remember, but everything you see on the screen is going to help you be successful. If you look at the measurement chart on the left or the big G on the right, it will help you to remember how much goes in each measurement. And just like the past couple of days, that rhyme, big to small, multiply them all, small to big, divide, you dig? That is your best friend. I know you're going to do awesome today. I can't wait to see how your work goes. Good luck!